Hello and welcome to In Business Talks 2. We're excited to welcome you to our bonus episode, The Friday Fix. We are your hosts Tracy, Annie and Earl, founders of In Business, a networking and business support community. And together we are In Business.
Every Friday we will be discussing a business related subject with either one of our wonderful In Business networking members or a fellow business owner who will be sharing their advice, thoughts or knowledge on a particular topic. Oh, and make sure you listen to the end of the show to hear our guests tell us about their favourite networking tip.
This week's episode is called No Jab, No Job, and our special guest is Sarah Bradley of the HR department. So sit back and enjoy.
So hello everyone and welcome. We are delighted to welcome our guest this week, Sarah Bradley. Welcome, Sarah.
Morning, Ian. Thank you very much for having me join you on your podcast today.
Thank you for being here this morning. It's good to have you on here.
Pleasure. Today we're going to be talking about the hot topic of jab or no job. That's referring to the COVID coronavirus vaccine and whether or not we can actually ask our employees to have the vaccine before they return to work or for them to attend the office.
Oh, that sounds pretty topical at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, a bit contentious as well.
Yeah.
It certainly is, and it's been in the press. There's been a few well-publicised companies suggesting that the vaccine should be mandatory for their employees or their workers.
Is that going to be quite common, do you think, then? What sort of problem do you think that'll cause?
I've certainly been asked for this advice from my clients already, so there's certainly interest out there as to what people can and can't say when it comes to whether or not we can ask our employees to have the jab. And no, it's not straightforward. It's not a black and white answer. I could actually say that it is an easy answer because there's lots of individual rights when it comes to whether or not we have to take medical treatment. And actually the black and white answer might be, no, you can't insist that your employees can have the jab. However, it's not as straightforward as that with certain industries. So if we've got vulnerable groups, so such as care homes, there might need to be a little bit more consideration that's put into the topic. If you're just an office environment where people can work from home, or if you're an industry that doesn't really involve interaction with other people at a close proximity, the answer is quite black and white. You're really not going to be able to say you must have the jab.
That's right, but having said that, it still could potentially cause problems, though, couldn't it, for organisations? How do you go on? I mean, it's all helping to prevent people from spreading COVID in and around the workplace, so it's quite a tricky subject, really, isn't it? What would be your advice then to an employer? What would you say? How would you broach it with an employee even?
I think that the employers and the businesses that are really keen on the vaccination, they should really start to talk to their employees about the jab and about some of the positive effects that we can find in the research about the jab, and just express why they think it's important for their industry. There's still too many open questions. I'm certainly not a coronavirus and COVID expert, but we don't really know the full effectiveness. Could social distancing still work in certain environments? If enough people have had the jab, will that be sufficient? It's a matter of time. The business themselves need to carry out a risk assessment, and they need to really consider why they believe the jab's important. And it's really clear to us all that if that was a care home, that would feel more relevant than if it was another environment. We need to then understand the individual's situation, why they are saying they don't want the jab. So some people have quite strong philosophical beliefs or quite strong religious beliefs that would mean that any instruction or insistence on them having the jab might mean that you could face an indirect discrimination claim on the grounds of philosophical or religious belief.
All right, so it could be really tricky subject, really. Then couldn't it? Could be really a bit of a difficult conversation with some people, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's really not straightforward, and it would then come down to kind of proportionate means and reasons. So I was thinking about this ahead of talking to you. If it's a very, very small business and you've got a very, very small team of staff, and to have one person without the jab would fundamentally affect your operations, it might be a legitimate response to say, actually, because of the size and resources of our organisation, we can make this decision to say, I'm sorry, but we can't continue to employ you if you don't have the jab. But if you're in a larger organisation and it's possible to reallocate the person, to move them to a different role, to reduce their contact with vulnerable people, it would be fairly impossible to restrict anybody's employment on a decision that they won't have the jab.
Right, and you say you've already had a few businesses sort of broach the subject with you and ask you a few questions about it. Are they concerned? Is it a big worry for them?
I think it's not really knowing still. It's been a lot of uncertainty with COVID and coronavirus. Some people's individuals' beliefs as business owners, or there are members of staff that might be saying, I'm not coming back if everybody doesn't have the jab. And so it's going to be a case by case basis. There's going to be lots of conversations and discussions with individuals to really make sure that we implement this effectively and get the economy going again with our businesses back at work.
I mean, I could see there being quite a few tribunals over it, and maybe people's view on it not being respected for certain reasons and causing all sorts of trouble in the workplace.
Yeah, it's got the potential. I mean, there's quite a lot of legislation to support the individual. There's actually a medical act which states that you can't make or ask or instruct somebody to have medical intervention against their wish and their will. So that's an interesting one. That's kind of within our human rights.
Yeah.
But it may not mean, so you can't insist somebody has the vaccination, the jab, but it may not mean that completely removes the ability to be able to dismiss somebody from their job. Like I said, if it's a small organisation and it's going to be difficult to work with the situation of that person not having the vaccination, it might be a reasonable response. It's going to be on a case by case basis. There's going to be lots and lots of conversations taking place.
Yeah, definitely. It's very
contentious, isn't it? Contentious.
Yeah.
Should businesses then be thinking about, if they haven't already, about broaching the subject now with their employees? Is it something they should be starting to think about, having a conversation? I mean, what would your tip be to start having a meeting with people as soon as possible and just discussing it with them rather than forcing any issues immediately? What are your thoughts?
I mean, there's also data protection as well. So when we say about conversations, to get to the extent of saying, well, I've got 30 employees and I'm going to make a list of who's had it and who hasn't, containing that information on a list in that way is subject to data protection regulations.
Of course, yeah, forgot about that. Yeah,
there's all sorts in there. It's a real
it's a minefield, isn't it? Yeah.
The person doesn't even have to, you can't oblige somebody to give their medical information without justification. So we can only ask for medical information with consent. If somebody doesn't want to give the consent, then another can of worms for us to think about there. But what should we do? We should be open about our business view as a business owner and maybe start to send some educational information around about what the vaccine involves, what information we can find. But people don't have to tell you, have they had the jab, haven't they had the jab. It's an interesting one, it really is.
Yeah, I think you're going to be kept fairly busy up this next year or two then, Sarah, with what's going to be happening and with the jab or no jab situation.
It's a little bit like when some employees didn't want to come back to work when we came out of the first lockdown, and it's a case of just looking on a case by case basis, understanding that individual's reason for why they've got their view, and just trying to work together to come to a reasonable resolution. And that's kind of the fundamentals of all employment law and HR management, understanding the person's individual position.
And you can help them do that, can't you, Sarah?
Absolutely, yes.
Great, lovely.
Of course you can. If anyone does want to get in touch with you, Sarah, would you like to just tell us your email address or your website or whatever, or telephone number, just to broadcast it out there so people can get in touch if they do have an issue about the jab or no jab situation or anything HR related, of course?
Yeah, contact me on sarah.bradley@hrdept.co.uk, and my website's really easily to find. It's the HR department, Leeds. Lots of information on there if people want to register for the newsletters. There's some free resources on there as well. So yeah, great for any business owners to get in touch. I'm really passionate about helping business owners understand what their rights are when it comes to employment law and HR management. Sometimes it can just feel like there's lots of legislation out there and it's quite difficult to understand. So any business owner that's kind of scratching their head wondering what direction to take when it comes to a people decision, just give me a call, drop me an email. That would be great. So yeah, sarah.bradley@hrdept.co.uk.
Excellent. Thank you very much,
Right,
Sarah.
thank you.
And just before we leave, I believe Tracy's got a question to ask you.
Oh yes, we know you're a notable networker. Do you have any tips for our networkers out there?
Yeah, get involved. So networking was new to me when I set up my business, and I managed to just get involved. So by that I mean, if somebody asks you to be a visitor host, then do it, because if you're the visitor host, you're the person that's got the excuse to welcome the guest and say hello and ask them who they are, and that might not feel so natural to everybody. So if you've got a defined role, maybe take an active role in being group leader if there's breakout sessions or if there's discussion groups. So my tip is, even to those that are feeling a little bit frightened or nervous about networking, just get involved. Give yourself a role that means that people know who you are and that they'll come to you and start a conversation, even, as I said, if that doesn't feel natural to you.
Lovely.
Brilliant.
That's
Excellent.
great.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was really informative, and we appreciate you coming on today and telling us all about the HR department and how to solve the potentially the jibber jab. Not easy to say. The
Jab or no job.
The jab or no jab, of course it is. Thank you, Sarah. We really appreciate that. It was very
Thank
kind
you.
of you and good to have you on the podcast.
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care,
Cheers,
Sarah.
thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
We are almost at the end of this week's episode, but before we go, we are excited to tell you about our In Business Talks 2 episode this coming Tuesday. Our special guests on next week's podcast are Dee and Alan Lazenby of Lazenby's Financial Services. We're really looking forward to speaking to them and digging deeper into their experiences as a business couple.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on In Business Talks 2 Friday Fix. We hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, all that we ask is that you simply tell a friend about the show. We'd really appreciate it. Until next time, this is Ian and Tracy, and together
we are In Business.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.